Case File Number 002. Title: The Night Visitors. Classification: Recurrent Nocturnal Encounters. Primary question: why have humans across civilizations described the same presence in the night? Focus: sleep paralysis, Lilu and Lilitu, and the birth of mythological beings. Before humans feared ghosts, we feared the night. Not metaphorically, literally. For most of our species' existence, darkness meant vulnerability. When the sun disappeared, vision failed. And when vision failed, imagination filled the gap. Every sound mattered. Wind through grass could be a predator. A shifting branch could be death. So the brain learned something very important. When you are unsure, assume danger. We built walls. We built doors. We built lights. But the mind we carry into the bedroom is still the same mind that once slept beside a fire while something moved just beyond it. Close your eyes for a moment. You are not in the safety of your modern bedroom. You are in a mud brick home along the Euphrates River. There are no windows, no glass, no streetlights. The only light comes from a small oil lamp, and it is almost gone. The air smells of clay and smoke. Outside, animals move somewhere beyond the walls, but you cannot see them. Night here is not dim. Night is absolute. You lie down on woven fibers beside others in the same room. There are no separate bedrooms, no doors to close. Sleep is not privacy. It is exposure. You close your eyes. Hours pass. Then you wake. You do not know why. You open your eyes slowly. The lamp has gone out. You try to roll onto your side. You cannot. You try to lift your arm, yet nothing moves. At first, you think your body is still asleep. Then you try to call out. No sound leaves your mouth. Your breathing becomes shallow. Your chest feels heavy. And then you notice something worse. You're not alone. You do not see it clearly. You do not need to. Your mind locates it instantly. It is standing somewhere in the darkness of the room, facing you, watching you realize it is there. You attempt to move again. Nothing happens. The harder you try, the heavier your body feels. Your heart races. You feel pressure against your chest. Not pain, but weight. As if something is leaning over you. You try to wake the others beside you. You cannot speak. You cannot move. You can only look forward. Time stops behaving normally. Seconds feel like hours. And then suddenly, you can move. You sit upright. You gasp for air. The room is empty. The others are still asleep. No one heard anything. When morning arrives, you do not say, "I had a dream." You say, "Something came to me in the night." And when you tell others, someone answers quietly, "That has happened to me too." That is the moment mythology begins. Not with imagination, with shared experience. Because when an event repeats across people, it becomes a presence. And a presence needs a name. One of the earliest recorded explanations appears in ancient Mesopotamia over 4,000 years ago. Texts describe night spirits called Lilu and Lilitu. These were not yet the medieval incubus and succubus. Those names came much later in Europe. The Mesopotamians believed these beings approached humans during sleep, associated with illness, vulnerability, and intimate encounters the sleeper could not control. To understand why people named night visitors, we first have to understand where they lived. Ancient Mesopotamia existed between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, in what is now modern-day Iraq. This region gave rise to some of the earliest cities in human history: Uruk, Ur, and Lagash. For the first time, large groups of humans were living together permanently inside walls made of sun-dried mud brick. But early civilization did not look comfortable. Homes were small, built tightly beside one another, and centered around a single main room. Families cooked there, worked there, and slept there. At night, everyone shared the same space. Children slept beside parents. Sometimes even animals remained indoors. Privacy, as we think of it, did not exist. After sunset, activity stopped quickly. Artificial light was limited. Oil lamps existed, but oil was valuable and could not burn all night. When the lamp was extinguished, the house entered complete darkness. Not dimness, true darkness. Inside a closed mud brick room with no windows, sight disappeared entirely. You could hear movement before you could identify it. A shifting mat, breathing beside you, a footstep you could not locate. Your awareness depended on sound alone. Mesopotamians believed the world was filled with unseen forces. Illness could appear suddenly. Infants sometimes died without warning. A healthy person could weaken overnight. Because causes were invisible, events were not considered random. They were believed to be intentional. Something had acted. Their religious understanding did not separate the natural from the supernatural. The environment, the wind, and even the air itself could contain beings with influence over human life. Night was considered a particularly vulnerable time. Not because darkness was symbolic, but because sleeping meant surrendering control. When asleep, a person could not guard themselves. They could not respond. And they could not explain what occurred around them. Written tablets from Mesopotamia show protective practices specifically connected to sleep. People spoke protective phrases before lying down. Objects were placed near entrances. Families attempted to guard the household while its members rested. They were not protecting against dreams. They were protecting against intrusion. So when someone woke, unable to move, aware of their surroundings but unable to react, when breathing felt restricted, when they sensed another presence in the room, they did not interpret it as the body malfunctioning. They interpreted it as a being entering a moment of human vulnerability. And that is where Lilu and Lilitu appear, not as creatures invented for entertainment, but as names given to an experience people believed was happening inside their homes. Centuries later, medieval Europe would reinterpret the same experience into the incubus and succubus, being said to lie upon sleepers at night. As Jewish folklore developed, the Lilitu spirit evolved into a figure known as Lilith, especially in writings such as the alphabet of Ben Sira. Lilith became Adam's first wife, created equal, refusing submission, leaving the Garden of Eden, and becoming associated with night, vulnerability, sexuality, and infants. By this point, the experience had gained narrative form. The visitor now had a personality. Many accounts included more than fear. They included sensation. Without understanding REM sleep, people could not explain how the body could interact while the mind did not choose it. So they explained it the only way available. If something physical happened, something must have been here. The visitor became an entity, not as an excuse, as an explanation. What makes this story unsettling is not that one culture believed it, it is that many did. Civilizations separated by oceans and centuries describe nearly the same encounter. Oddly enough, this is one detail about the story that many overlook. The people who described them were not connected. The Mesopotamians did not speak with medieval Scandinavians. Rural Newfoundland fishermen never met Japanese monks. Ancient Chinese households shared no language with European villagers. And yet, their descriptions match. Not perfectly, but closely enough to be uncomfortable. So how is that possible? There are a few explanations. The first is simple. All humans share the same biology. We have the same sleep cycles, the same REM paralysis, and the same fear response. If the body produces a specific sensation, the brain may interpret it in a similar way across cultures. In other words, people were not sharing a story, they were sharing a nervous system. But that alone does not explain everything, because people do not only report fear, they report intention. There is also culture. When an experience is difficult to explain, people borrow meaning from the world around them. A Mesopotamian mind interprets a presence as a spirit. A medieval Christian mind interprets it as a demon. A modern mind may call it sleep paralysis. The sensation may be similar, but the interpretation changes. And yet, there remains something that keeps the story alive. Because even when people know what sleep paralysis is, many still describe the same feeling. Not confusion, not imagination, awareness, as if something noticed them. So perhaps mythology did not spread across cultures through contact. Perhaps it spread through a shared human experience. The same body, the same night, the same moment between waking and dreaming. Different explanations, but a single event waiting to be understood. To understand why humans gave the night a visitor, we have to look at the one place every experience actually begins: the brain. The human brain did not evolve for truth. It evolved for survival. For most of human history, being wrong could be fatal. If you heard a sound in tall grass and assumed it was nothing, you might not live long enough to learn the mistake. But if you assumed danger and you were wrong, you only wasted energy. So the brain adopted a rule. It is safer to imagine a threat that is not there than to ignore one that is. Fear, then, is not a weakness. It is a protective system. Deep inside the brain is a small structure called the amygdala. It is ancient, older than language, older than reasoning. The amygdala does not analyze carefully. It reacts quickly. Before you consciously understand what you are seeing, the amygdala has already decided whether you should prepare to fight, freeze, or run. Your heart accelerates, your breathing changes, your muscles tense. You feel alert. Not because you chose to, but because the brain chose for you. At night, this system becomes especially sensitive. When vision is limited, the brain feels missing information. A shadow becomes a figure. A sound becomes footsteps. A shape becomes a face. This is not imagination in the playful sense. This is prediction. The brain is constantly trying to identify agents, other minds, in the environment. Because throughout human history, the most dangerous thing a human could encounter was another being with intention. Now consider sleep. During dreaming, the brain is extremely active, but the body is intentionally immobilized. This state is called REM sleep. Your muscles are temporarily shut down so you do not physically act out your dreams. Normally, your mind wakes after your body regains movement. But sometimes the order reverses. Your awareness returns first. Your body does not. You open your eyes, you can see the room, but you cannot move. And your brain tries to understand why. The amygdala is still active. The body cannot respond. The brain searches for an explanation. And the brain is very good at one thing: assigning cause. It does not like unanswered events, so it builds a narrative. The pressure on your chest becomes weight. The inability to move becomes restraint. The fear becomes a watcher. The mind translates sensation into presence, not intentionally, by any means, but automatically. And here is where something remarkable happens. The brain does not simply create a vague feeling. It creates an agent, a being, because humans are social creatures. Our brains are specialized to detect other minds. We recognize faces in clouds, figures in shadows, voices in noise. But when the body is paralyzed, the room is dim, and fear is active. The brain supplies the most logical explanation it knows. Someone is here. But the brain does not create details randomly. It uses culture. A Mesopotamian mind fills the darkness with Lilitu. A medieval European mind sees a night hag. A modern person may see a shadow figure. The experience stays similar, but the identity changes. The mind is not inventing the fear. It is interpreting it using the world it understands. This does not mean ancient people were irrational. They were interpreting a real experience using the knowledge available to them. They sensed intention. And given those facts, a visitor was a reasonable explanation. They were not creating myth. They were creating reality as they perceived it. And even today, many people who experience sleep paralysis insist on something important. It does not feel like a dream. It feels external. That may be because the part of the brain that evaluates reality, the prefrontal cortex, is still partially inactive when the event occurs. The emotional brain is awake. The reasoning brain is not fully online yet. So the experience bypasses skepticism. You do not question it. You experience it. Which leads us to a final possibility. Perhaps Lilu and Lilitu were not simply invented beings. Perhaps they were the first human attempt to describe a boundary state. The moment between sleeping and waking. Between imagination and perception. Between internal experience and external interpretation. The brain did not create fear. Fear shaped what the brain believed it encountered. Because when a person wakes in the night unable to move, with their heart racing, their breath restricted, and the mind convinced they are being watched, they don't feel like they imagined something. They feel like something happened to them. And for thousands of years, the name given to that happening was a visitor. Tonight, we started in a bedroom. Not in a temple, not in a forest, not in mythology. In a quiet room with someone trying to sleep. We followed a single experience across time and watched as different cultures tried to explain it. Mesopotamia called it Lilu and Lilitu. Later traditions called it Lilith. Other societies gave it different names, but they were all describing the same kind of encounter. Something that came when the body could not respond. We talked about how the brain reacts to fear, how it searches for cause, and how an unexplained event becomes a story. And that may be where mythology begins. Not with invention, but with interpretation. But something interesting happens once a culture accepts that unseen beings can enter the home. The world outside the home changes too. Because if something can stand beside your bed, why couldn't something stand just beyond the firelight? The earliest myths after night visitors were not about dreams. They were about encounters while fully awake. Hunters described figures moving beyond trees. Travelers reported being followed across empty roads. Voices were heard in places where no person stood. Shapes were seen at distances too far to identify, but too clear to dismiss. And unlike the visitor in the bedroom, these were not confined to sleep. People insisted they were conscious, walking, watching. Remember, early humans did not separate the natural and the supernatural the way we do. They lived in a world where intention existed everywhere. Rivers could have will. Wind could have awareness. And wilderness, especially wilderness, could have inhabitants. This is where creatures began to appear. Not symbolic ones. Beings people believed shared the landscape with them. Hair-covered figures in forests. Human-like shapes in mountains. Entities that mimicked voices in the dark. Not visitors of the night, but neighbors of the world. Next time we step outside, into the places where stories stop sounding like sleep and start sounding like sightings. Because after humans named what stood beside the bed, they began naming what waited beyond the trees. And the unsettling part is this. People didn't say they dreamed these. They said they encountered them. Until next time, if the night ever feels too quiet, you might not be imagining why. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Cryptic Mind podcast. If you liked this episode, please like, subscribe, and leave a review. Please follow me on social media, all of which I have linked in my bio wherever you are listening. See you next time.